Hi guys, this is Xiaomi Max, aka the King of Eye Test. Welcome back to another video on the channel. So I'm the expert on all your tactics and formations simply because of the number of games that I actually watch. So we actually have the buy-sell monitor for Gameweek 5. Now all the graphics that you see in this video is actually done by my guy Inverts. So if you need somebody who's actually going to do your graphics at a very affordable price, he's the man for you. Link will be down in the description below. Let's move on to the first guy, and we're actually going to talk about Ollie Watkins. If you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Ollie Watkins. Very durable, starts lots of games, usually get through to the 90-minute mark. It's worth noting, however, that in 2 of the past 4 games, right, he actually got subbed off at the 70th minute mark. So he's not as big a 90 minutes man, right, as we thought he would be as compared to the previous season. Now, this might actually mean that DRB might actually be a little bit more explosive given that he's actually 1.4 mil cheaper as well as being way more explosive. Watkins is just like a very solid pick, right? Gets you and go on an assist every single time. Don't expect him to explode and score like 2 to 3 goals. Not gonna happen. He usually just ticks along very well. He also no longer has penalties in his locker, right? The responsibility is actually now with Douglas Luiz. He does, however, have some really nice fixtures coming up, right? Palace in Game Week 5, Wolves in Game Week 8 itself. So if you actually take a look at the expected goals conceded, right? This is from Fantasy Football Scout. Wolves are actually the 5th worst defense in the league with 7.87 expected goals conceded. So I expect Villa to score against them and Watkins to be in on the act. Now, Villa has been really impressive for me going forward, and I definitely want a piece of that attacking pie. So it's a good option, right, if you're looking to offload somebody like João Pedro. He also has West Ham and Luton Town in Game Week 9 and 10, which I expect Villa to score. Hopefully, Watkins is actually a part of that. The next guy that I actually want to talk about, right, is Nicholas Jackson. If you have watched my previous video, right, I did mention that Jackson looked decent in the win against Luton. He did fluff a couple of chances against West Ham, and he, of course, missed that sitter against Nottingham Forest. Right, for me, right, he's actually a monitor. He's still very young at 22 years old. He did score 12 goals in 26 league games for Villarreal last season, which is, of course, a fantastic record. But the Premier League is a whole different ballgame altogether. Way more fast-paced and way more physical. The refs tend not to call fouls to let the game flow better. So, most players, right, they typically need about 1 to 2 seasons to adapt before they can actually start performing. So Jackson is no different. He definitely has the attributes to become a really good player. Pretty pacey, decently strong. Now for me, his 2 major weaknesses are his first touch and his composure. He definitely needs to work on these 2, right, before he can become a very good striker and FPL asset. That is why I actually recommended for you guys to go for Sterling instead of Jackson, because Sterling is tested and proven in the Premier League. Of course, right, Chelsea still have a great set of fixtures upcoming against Bournemouth in Game Week 5, Fulham in Game Week 7, and Burnley in Game Week 8. Burnley is actually a very attacking side, so they won't actually sit back. Like I already mentioned, Fulham actually have the worst defense in the league in terms of expected goals conceded. Bournemouth is the 3rd worst defense. It simply means that Chelsea, right, will have plenty of chances and space. The only question is if Jackson can actually convert all those chances. Now, I think he will, and the reason you bought him in is because of this set of nice fixtures, so do give him the games. If you haven't bought him in, right, I would strongly advise against buying him, as I think that there are better options. Next guy that I actually want to talk about is actually Julian Alvarez. He's under the monitor list. He actually has started all 4 of the games so far, and as you guys can see, right, he has actually gotten 90 minutes in all but the previous game where he was substituted out in the 89 minute. For me, I think if I had to choose between Foden and Alvarez, I'll go for Alvarez simply because I think he will start more often than Phil Foden. City have already signed Doku and Matthew Nunes, right? So Bernardo Silva also started on the bench against Fulham. I don't expect Bernardo Silva, right, to miss out on too many games, frankly. And we also have Champions League starting after Game Week 5. Now, for Man City's Champions League group, it's actually very easy. Right, Red Star Belgrade, Young Boys is actually very easy games. The slightly tougher game for me will actually be against RB Leipzig. So what this means for me simply is that Man City, right, will rotate more because they have a way easier group. So expect to see lots and lots of rotation. For now, we don't know how Pep Guardiola is actually going to rotate the team, for me, right, Ederson, Haaland, Rodri, and possibly Diaz, right, are kind of like the only locks in the Man City team. It might just be actually worth, right, to wait until game week 7 before actually bringing in any of, the Man City assets other than Haaland to actually see, right, how Pep is actually going to rotate the team. Now, Alvarez is also on your corner kicks as well. He also already has 2 goals and 3 assists, so he's definitely one to monitor for me. So of course you can try to get ahead of the curve and get him in for the game against West Ham. I think you can possibly do that if you have very good playing subs on your bench, right, like a Cameron Archer, Semedo, or another defender. We should also get some early league team news, right, for game week 6, right, given that City actually play first. So possibly you could also wait till game week 6 to actually get Julian Alvarez in, because we will actually have early league team news. That's actually the game against Nottingham Forest. Next guy, right, that I want to talk about that has massively flown under the radar, right, is actually Emoni. Definitely one of the most overlooked players in my opinion. He actually has returned in all 4 games so far, despite playing Arsenal, United, and City, with 3 goals and 1 assist. So if we actually go back to last season, right, he actually scored 6 goals and had 1 assist in the last 11 games. So he's actually on a very good run of form, right? He has been carrying that form over from the previous season. So he seems to relish the biggest games too, right? He did score against Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool last season as well. So I read somewhere that he actually has the 4th highest expected points per minute in the league. So he's definitely the number 1 striker there, with Wood as a backup. So with the likes of Gibbs White supplying him the ammunition, right, I see him doing very well. He also has some pretty easy fixtures coming up, right? Burnley, Palace, and Luton are all games whereby I can see him getting more returns. What I really like about him, right, is actually his minutes and the guaranteed starts compared to somebody like Alvarez, who is definitely more explosive compared to Emoni, but he's not guaranteed the minutes and the starts. So Emoni, right, is definitely somebody that you can buy and just leave in your team without having to transfer out, unless of course he gets injured. So if you're looking to move off a João Pedro, right, upgrading your 4.5 mil striker, or possibly even moving off Jackson, I think there's actually no better option than Ewoni. He's also only owned by 4.5% of the game, which makes him a huge differential. So don't sleep on Ewoni. The next player that I want to talk about that is a sell is actually your Onana. So we know for a fact that Man United, right, have defensive issues. Right, Varane was substituted in the game against Nottingham Forest. United confirmed that he's actually going to be out for a few weeks. Now, on the FPL website, he's due to be back on the 30th of September, which is actually the game against Palace in game week 7. Now, United might choose to play it safe given Varane's past injury record, so he might possibly start in game week 8 against Brentford. So Martinez also came off with a foot injury against Arsenal. He has since been called up for the Argentina national team, and they have actually declared him fit, so I fully expect him to start against Brighton in game week 5. However, right, I think the bigger issue that United have, right, is actually in midfield. We are actually getting overrun very easily in midfield. We did sign Nordin Amrabat to actually combat that issue. It's also worth noting, however, right, that he didn't play for Fiorentina at all this season. He also had a slight back injury when United signed him, so don't expect him to slot straight into the team and start playing 90 minutes week in, week out. I think he's gonna be slowly eased into the team. He probably won't start against Brighton. More likely to come on as a substitute if he's actually fit. So I definitely see him starting against Palace probably in game week 7 and then coming off at about the 60th minute mark. So he will definitely help give us more control of the midfield and of course then relieve some of the pressure on the defense itself. But it would most definitely take some time. We do have a couple of nice fixtures coming up, right? I think maybe we are going to keep a clean sheet against Sheffield United, possibly against Crystal Palace. I don't think we're going to keep a clean sheet against Brighton, Man City, and Brentford. It's worth noting also that Burnley is actually very attacking. So with only 1 to 2 clean sheet, right, in the next 5 games, right, you can look to move in on, right, if you actually don't have other fires to put out in your team. It's also worth noting, right, Man United, right, actually have the 6th worst defense in the league with 7.58 expected goals conceded. So definitely, right, Onana is kind of a sell for me if, you can afford to actually do that. So if you're looking to move away from Onana, right, look no further than Bert Leno. You might be wondering, right, why am I recommending a goalkeeper, right, whose defense is the worst in the Premier League? Right, Fulham has the worst expected goals conceded with 12.11, right, and Man United is actually in 6th, like I mentioned. However, right, if you actually take a look around in the Premier League this season, right, there are actually very, very little clean sheets. In the previous game week, we only have Nottingham Forest and Liverpool who actually kept a clean sheet. So I think, right, it's actually time to get keepers, right, who are actually save points magnet. And Leno, right, is definitely the best goalkeeper, right, in terms of clocking saves. He did make the most amount of saves last season. So even if you don't get a clean sheet, right, at least you get 2 points for his, 6 saves that he will actually make on average. So far this season, he has been averaging around 5 to 6 saves per game, right? 9 saves in game week 1, as you guys can see on the graphic. 5 in game week 2, and then 8 in game week 3. Of course, he didn't make any save against Man City, but Man City is a whole different story altogether. So it's actually not too unrealistic, right, to expect him to continue to make between 5 to 6 saves every game. The way that Fulham plays, right, just allows him to actually make really good saves, given that sometimes they actually don't really give good chances away to the opposition. So I see them possibly, right, keeping clean sheets against the likes of Luton and Sheffield United in game week 5 and game week 8. Chelsea is, of course, one of the massively, right, underperforming sides in terms of creating chances and taking them. So if Jackson continues to miss the big chances and then, shoots straight at Leno, right, I do expect Leno to clock a few save points, right, against Chelsea as well. And if we actually go and take a look at the tough run, right, that Bert Leno has, right, his tough run kind of really starts only from game week 9 onwards, right? They're going to face Spurs. Game week 10, they have Brighton. In game week 11, they actually have Man United. So I think you can actually still play him, right, to actually clock up the save points, which you can say is actually why we bought him in the first place. So Leno, for me, right, with the very little amount of clean sheets that we have been seeing in the Premier League this season, right, it's actually the way to go for me. Just get him in for the save points. Of course, right, we most definitely have to talk about our hat-trick hero, Sonny. I did mention in the previous video that I think Richarlison will get dropped against Burnley, and I expected Perisic to come in for Richarlison, with Sonny moving into that striker role. Now, in the end, right, it was Solomon who actually came in on the left. I definitely didn't expect to see Son score a hat-trick through the middle. Now, Burnley in that game, right, was actually playing with a very, very high line, which actually left Sonny, right, plenty of space in behind, right. Sonny is exceptionally quick. It's worth noting, right, that Son is one of the best finishers in the league as well. Absolutely lethal, having scored at least, right, 10 league goals every season since he joined Spurs, except for his first year. Now, he's also a constant performer, right, or overperformer, right, over his expected goals, which goes to highlight his elite finishing. The question right now is, will Son stay as the central striker? I think that's a very important question. I think he will. His only true competitor really, right, is Richarlison, because I expect Brennan Johnson, right, to actually play more as a winger. If he plays through the middle, he can be a very, very good option. I don't like him when he actually plays off the left under Postecoglou, right? When he plays there, right, it seems that he goes really, really wide with Udogie, right, coming inside more. So he's actually too far away from the goal to actually affect, that play. As a central striker, he definitely looks way more dangerous. Now, in game week 8, it's worth noting, right, that Man City actually, right, plays Arsenal away. So in game week 8, I don't think that I'm actually going to captain Haaland. So that is the reason why I actually, right, like the looks of Son in game week 8. So if you're actually looking to move away from captaining Haaland in game week 8, right, you can actually take a look at Son, because he actually has Luton away. So that will actually, right, give you more incentive, right, to get Son as well. Now, some of you actually have this issue, right? If let's say you already have Maddison and you can't decide whether to go for Son, I would say that a double up at this point with Son and Maddison is actually not that bad a shout. Given, right, like I mentioned so many times in the videos, I've seen Spurs so many times and they are very, very impressive going forward. I think that no matter which teams they're going to play against, right, they will actually really, really attack. They press very, very high up the pitch as well. So I think that, even the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool, right, will struggle against Spurs. And no matter what kind of team they're playing, I expect Spurs, right, to score plenty of goals, which will mean that Son and Maddison, right, will both get returns. So the two of them combined together are actually great differentials for you to actually climb the places in your mini leagues. However, if you don't have Maddison and Son and you're deciding just to have one, right, I would definitely still go for Maddison. Now, Son is definitely, right, way more explosive than Maddison. But Maddison, for me, right, is the guy to go for because he's on all the set pieces. There is nobody really challenging him for his place. and he's actually more likely to play 90 minutes compared to Son. So for Son, we have to worry, right, about his position. If it's off the left, we don't really like him. If it's through the middle, we actually really like him. Son should also have penalties if Richarlison doesn't play. So overall, right, I will get Maddison first before getting Son, just simply because of the fact that all the good stuff that Spurs do, right, is actually going through Maddison at the moment. So some players that you can move for actually Son is actually the likes of Martinelli, Odegaard, or Bruno Fernandes. So those are the players that you can actually move them on for. So the next player for us is actually Kieran Trippier. Now Newcastle currently hasn't even clocked a single clean sheet, given that they have actually played some of the league's best attack in Man City, Liverpool, as well as Brighton. However, it's worthy to note that they actually have the joint best defense last season alongside Man City. Right, both sides only conceded 33 goals across the stretch of the whole season. So right now, Botman, right, who's a key player in that Newcastle central defense, is actually out with an ankle injury. He didn't play in the previous game against Brighton, and Dan Burn was actually that guy who filled in at centre half. Now Dan Burn, right, hasn't really played centre back much, right? He usually plays as a left back for Newcastle, and he definitely showed against Brighton. Really slow to react, kind of sluggish, which is actually not very, very good for Newcastle's defense. I expect to see Lascelles, right, starting at centre-back in the next game against Brentford if Botman doesn't come back, and Dan Burn, right, to actually go back out onto that left-hand side as a left-back. So Botman, right, did share a video on his IG story of him having lunch at the training ground with the words "back soon." Of course, we don't know when exactly he will be back. He might miss the game against Brentford, and my guess is he probably will be back against Sheffield United in Gameweek 6 at the latest. So Newcastle, right, also go into a really, really nice run of games against Sheffield United, right, Burnley, Palace, as well as Wolves. I really, really like the looks of the fixtures. Now, we all know that Newcastle, right, has been drawn in the group of death in the Champions League, right, alongside PSG, AC Milan, as well as Borussia Dortmund. However, I fully expect Trippier, right, to be one of the few locks in this Newcastle team, given how inexperienced, right, Livermore is actually. He might come off in the 60th minute, right, especially if Newcastle is cruising in the game. So for me, right, I don't see Kieran Trippier's minutes or starts, right, being at risk there, even with the tough games that Newcastle have in the Champions League. Now, also, I've already spoken about the lack of clean sheets being a common theme in the first few weeks of the Premier League. Trippier is always very likely, right, to pick up a goal or assist, right? He's actually still on free kicks and corner kicks, and he has actually really created some good chances, right, in the previous few game weeks. So for me, right, you don't really have to rush to get him in right now. You can actually wait for that Sheffield United game in game week 6, because I don't think Newcastle will actually keep a clean sheet against Brentford. Now, Botman is also very likely to come back in game week 6, right, further strengthening that defense, and of course, right, that gives her a higher chance of a clean sheet itself. So the next player that I actually want to talk about is actually Darwin Núñez. He's under the monitor list. Now, he started the game against Aston Villa and he came out with 2 assists. Could have had way more points, right? He did miss a very big chance that Salah crossed for him. But of course, it's not something that is actually very surprising for us, right? Given we know that Núñez, right, actually does miss some very, very big chances. He did miss quite a few last season as well. He scored 2 goals against Newcastle with 2 really good finishes. Now, there's no doubt that if he actually continues to start, he's most definitely, right, a good option. For me, right, what is the most important thing right now, right? It's actually whether Salah leaves. So at the time of recording, we actually now know that Al Ittihad, right, has actually submitted an improved offer, right? They increased their bid from 150 mil to 217 mil pounds for Mo Salah. So I think he will leave, given the fact that, he's actually going to get a lot of money, right? He's going to be the highest paid player in the world, even surpassing Ronaldo's salary of 1.3 mil pounds. And also, right, Liverpool will be getting a 270 million pounds fee, right, for a player who is already 31 years old and only has 2 years left on his contract. So if he does leave, for me, Núñez will definitely, right, start way more often, and he becomes, right, a very, very attractive way into that Liverpool attack. I've watched Liverpool, right, across all the first 4 game weeks this season, and I've been really, really impressed with how they attack. In my opinion, right, they have the second best attack after Manchester City. Whenever they attack, they look like they're going to score every single time, and I definitely, right, want a piece of that attack. And if Mo Salah goes, right, Núñez, Jota, and Luis Diaz, right, looks really, really good options. So we now head into 2 weeks of international break, right? I would say that if you guys have transfers that you really want to make, I would still suggest, right, for you guys to hold off on the transfers, because especially when players travel to faraway countries, right, like your South African players in the shape of Darwin Núñez, right, even if they don't get injured, there's a chance that when they come back from their long haul flights, the managers might choose to rest them, right? South America players, Asia players, not to mention the fact that they might get injured. I know that, there's always the temptation, given that, price will rise and fall. So unless, right, you really need that 0.1 to actually make that move, right, I would strongly advise against buying players early. Once again, right, the graphics that you see here are all done by my guy Inverts. If you want graphics done at a reasonable price, check out his link down in the description below. I'm actually gonna come up with a differential video next week to actually tell you guys, right, what are some of the players that you can actually buy to actually make up ground on your friends in your mini leagues, right? So do check that video out. That's all from me. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you guys want to see more FPL content, hit that sub button. Alright, and I'm out. Take care, guys.